I'm Cynthia Moore Brown, and I have lived here in Greensboro, just around the corner in Summerfield, and in Greensboro for since I fell in love 50 years ago. I lived at the coast and came up here to go to college because there were no boys, supposedly, at UNCG. Guess what? Daddy got fooled. They let 500 boys in to kind of test it out, and my husband Fred was one of them. So he fell madly in love with me in French class of all places. And we dated a long time because I had to train him. And then we finally got married and have lived here since. But I grew up down on the coast, and I'll tell you some stories from there. I love it down there still, and I grew up there and still went back a lot. I talked Fred into building a little teeny house we could rent to people, so we had some place to go so I could still visit my mama and my family down there. This has been such a difficult, awful year. The strangest year we've all ever lived through, our age and younger or older. And there's been so much heartache. So I'm thrilled to be with you all and with an actual, and it sounds crazy, but live audience, because I've been doing the Zooms, and last year I only did 2 shows, and that was at Blandwood Mansion outside. So I'm doing them again this year, and did one Friday night. And I thought, this is wonderful, because now I can go. I'm not going to very many places. You all are special. I said, I don't know, I'm not going to do any indoor shows, but we assured each other that it would be safe, so it will be. I'm doing this show in honor of, like I said, Janie and Charlotte, but I'm also doing it in memory of my husband. I lost him a year and a half ago, and since then, I'm not just what sure the Lord has in mind for me, because I have lost so many, but that's okay. It makes me stronger, and with all my friends and family and folks like you, I know that I can do this. And the stories are healing. I know you'll say, well, they're folk tales and ghost stories. How could that be healing? But it is. Just bringing these to life and to share something with you all. I lost Fred's whole family, except for his sister, 4 dear, dear friends, and then 2 weeks ago, my mother passed away. She was 97, and I can feel her here today. She was really lively, and you knew her, Nancy, or met her or heard of her so much, till about the last month. So she would be here. She'd go all over the country with me. Well, when I wasn't traveling with Nancy and the other art teachers, she went to New Orleans where I was speaking, and she'd come to every little podunk library in North Carolina, and the kids loved her. She'd sit there. Even after she was in a wheelchair, she would come. She had very bad arthritis, and she'd come, and she was always dressed up. You can tell where I get it from. She had on glitz this, and of course earrings, and this and that. She was an incredible woman, so she would be here. I learned a lot of my stories, too, though, from my dad. He was in the Navy, so he brought back all kinds of stories from around the world. He passed away suddenly at only 48, so I still tell the stories because that keeps him alive. If these remind you of any, I'm going to have to leave, but I hope that you'll share some of the stories with each other at other times after I'm gone, and to keep your stories alive too. And I'm sure you're, I hope, still telling them and sharing them. If you don't have any close relatives, tell a stranger, because it might turn out you're related, or definitely that they would relate to your stories. Now, storytelling is as old as the world, but as fresh as the rain. With a story, you can be here or in outer space or anywhere. So if you're a believer, come in. If you're a believer, a hoper, a prayer, a wisher, a flyer, or a magic bean buyer, then come sit by our fire. for we've got flax golden tales to spin. Come right in. Beware this witch's magic glance, for just one look into her eye might turn you to cute little kitty cats. Meow, meow, meow. And beware, for just one sip of her magic brew could turn you into shiny black bats to fly the midnight skies. Yeah! Everyone, can you help me do that laugh? Just, get yourself to it. Okay, I'm going to count to 2. We're going to see who can do the best one. Are you ready? 1, 2. You guys are awesome. Give yourselves a clap. Did you hear? Fabulous. When I'm telling ghost stories in the graveyard, I love graveyards for the art. I was a K-5 art teacher, retired. I would have the children reach up both arms. Can you reach up? Just reach as high as you can, because I know I've had a shoulder replacement, rotator cuff. Look at y'all. You all are great. And shake your hands as hard as you can. Well, till it hurts. No, don't make it hurt. And that's the silent clap, because we don't want to disturb anybody in the graveyard. Luckily, we're not in a graveyard. And that way we can still let everybody know that we're awake for the stories and that we like them. Come in to the witch's garden, my pretties. Come inside. You'll find no flowers in this garden. Nothing minty, nothing chivy, just lots and lots of poison ivy. Come on, everybody, help me do the laugh. 1, 2. Thank you, Miss Witch. She's not really a baby witch. She is about 50 years old. I made her even before I was an art teacher. I worked at the library. And she's a rod puppet. And you can tell when I made her face from, except we don't wear these anymore, right, girls? Anybody recognize what it is? You men bet. Well, you men have probably seen them. It's a knee-high pantyhose. And her hair's Spanish moss from my house. My mama's down east. So she's about 50. One year, it was terrible, I lost her. So I had to make another one. So now I have 2. Okay, come on over here and just relax a little now that you've done your part. Uh-oh.
I saw it coming.
You saw it coming?
I saw it coming.
Well, I just don't know. Like I
Get
said,
comfortable.
I think I got too many clothes on. Donna doesn't wear any clothes, Or Brittany or any of those others.
What, you talking about Britney Spears?
Yeah, when she wears these microphones.
Oh, I have no clue. This is just friends' homes, not
Okay,
Staples.
well, can you wrap it around my ear more? The stories I'm going to share today are some true, some you decide, and some are from, well, no, I'd say all of them are from my 3 books. When I retired 16, 17 years ago, can you believe it's been that long, Nancy? I started and was lucky enough to meet a young lady named Teresa, who had a publisher. And that's the big thing when you're writing books. So she helped me get the publisher interested, and we wrote the first book. The first book was Piedmont, North Carolina Tales. So these are ones like right around here, around the corner and across the street. I think I should tell you that one first. Wait a minute, where are they? Oh, here they are. I actually sold some of them, so I think I got some left, yes. And I've talked to Mary. I'm going to try and leave you one or bring you one for your library here, so you can at least have this one. And this was my first one, Piedmont, Folktales and Ghost Stories in North Carolina. It's Piedmont. And the story that I like the best is the one at Guilford College, like right across the street. In the long years ago, Guilford College auditorium was built on the site of a hospital. And it saw lots of troops during the Civil War being cared for there, some losing their lives there. So it's supposed to be very, very haunted. And when I say haunted, I don't do or like evil spirits like they show all those ones on TV and movies. I don't believe all that. They're just trying to be theatrical, aren't they? The spirits I've heard about and read about and felt in houses are there, lingering, because they like the house or they still want to be close to someone they love, not just, because they're mad about something or being haunting and scary. Now, they do want their attention sometimes, so some of those stories about how a candlestick falls off, I guess that could be true. I've never myself, even though I've tried to see it, seen one of those. So, Dana Auditorium was built, and it's a grand place. I've been to plays and music there. I know you have too, probably over the years. But supposedly you should not stay after dark. After they close, well, not after dark. You're there after dark, but you shouldn't be there alone after dark. When they close those doors is when all the spirits seem to come out. Now, one was a story someone told very, very seriously. They were walking down one of the halls, and the rehearsal rooms, and she heard the piano playing. Well, it was way late at night, but she thought she heard some beautiful Claire de Lune or something, and she knocked on the door, and there was no answer. And she opened the door, and there was no one in the practice room, just the piano sitting there empty. When she closed the door, the music started again. This happens supposedly frequently, late at night, when someone's walking down that hall. Now, my friend Tom Bean worked at Taylor and at ACOC, but he said there was a story he'd heard about Dana, that when you turn all the lights off and you get ready to leave, that sometimes you can look up and see just a filmy shadow. If you had a flashlight or turned the lights back on, there'd be nothing there. But I've always wanted to stay after a concert and see. But unfortunately, I haven't. But that's still one of my goals, because another spirit wants to keep playing. They turn the lights back on, just the theater lights right there in front. As soon as everybody's gone and they turn the lights out, you can see outside, doing a light comes on. So these are some of the spirits that supposedly, happily, haunt Dana Auditorium. I was trying to decide which stories to tell you, and it's so hard because I have so many that I love. Some I've experienced, some are historic, some are ones my mama told me or my dad, and my Grandma Mary and Grandma Frances were good storytellers too. This one's about a lazy, 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 lazy little girl. Nobody y'all probably know. But Lulu was so lazy, why, she couldn't even eat fried chicken because it would jump off her plate, and it was just too much work. She was so lazy that when she grew up, her mama wanted her to go to college. No, she didn't have time for that. She was too busy with boys and, and stuff like that. Well, Lulu got older and just got real selfish and a little bit mean, and Mom and Daddy were talking with the preacher, and he says, you need to get her something, to work with. So they decided it would be perfect. Great-great-great-great-grandma needed a companion. That's what they called us back then, for them. And she lived in her 100-year-old house, and she was 138 years old. So she really needed some company. So Lulu went to stay with great-great-great-great-grandma. Now, great-great-grandma was delighted because she loved to tap on the ceiling with her cane. And I mean the ceiling because her room was upstairs. So when she tapped, then that would go downstairs, and Lulu would hear it, and sure enough, she'd go upstairs and see whatever Grandma wanted. Now, I had to ask myself, why did they have Grandma on the second floor? That's not very handicapped, but back then, I mean, Lulu was taking care of her, and she didn't need to get downstairs. So Lulu went up and down, up and down. She was getting plumb worn out. Why, she'd even have to take a nap in the afternoons. One afternoon, she was sleeping so sound that she, didn't hear. And that was not good. Great-Grandma got so mad that when Lulu came up the steps, she said, "Lulu, what have you been, girl? You've been lollygagging around. I wish I had the strength to smack the fire out of you." And of course she didn't, but Lulu, it put some fear into her. So from then on, she was up there as soon as she heard. But another day, she was busy writing a love note to somebody, and sure enough, she didn't go. But when she finally got up there, Great-Grandma was in her high poster bed. She was really mad. She said, "Lulu, I'm going to get that strength, and I'm going to smack the fire out of you, girl. You're just lazy." Well, this went on, but she did love Lulu, and Lulu loved her grandma. She just was so lazy and forgetful. Well, it happened, of course. It all's going to happen to all of us. And may she rest in peace. This was about 50 years ago. But Great-Grandma passed away. And everybody was saying, you know what people say. "Oh, she's resting in peace. It was her time," you know, that stuff they say. Meaning well. The next day at church, though, Lulu wasn't in church. Everybody talked about it, and they thought, you know, Lulu was probably going to take this very hard because she was so close to Great-Grandma. And sure enough, she did not even come to the church supper. Now, I'll tell you what, there was one thing that Lulu did not miss, and that was her church suppers on Sunday night, because her church had the best cooks, just like mine growing up. You didn't miss that. So everybody said, "We've got to go and check on Lulu." So they all went, taking the preacher, taking Aunt Sis, she was very formidable, and went to the house. The door was ajar. And when they walked in, they looked in the parlor. No Lulu. They looked in the living room. No Lulu. They looked in the kitchen and the dining room and the bathroom, and no Lulu. "Uh-oh," said Aunt Sis. "I reckon we got to go upstairs." Nobody wanted to go upstairs. So they sent Aunt Sis first. She went up the stairs, and they followed after her. And they went in bedroom number 1. Can you help me? No Lulu. That was good. That's good. Wake up in the front row. Oh, just kidding. Then they went in bedroom number 2 and 3. No Lulu. They went in bedroom number 4, 5, 6. It was a big old house. No Lulu. Then, they had to go in Great-Grandma's room. So they sent Aunt Sis. She went in, and it was dead quiet. They listened and thought she was going to holler for them. And all of a sudden, they heard her screaming. They all jumped, and they went rushing in, and there was Aunt Sis laying on the floor. "Oh, my gracious, my dear." If I could get close to you, I'd be patting you on the cheek. "Oh, my dear, are you okay?" And they help her up, but she doesn't say nothing. She just points one hand over towards the big 4-poster bed, and there laying in the bed is, oh my gracious, Lulu. Yep, and Lulu looked deader than a doornail. Oh my gosh, she looked terrible. Here's how she looked. But she weren't dead. Her mama got up real close to her and she says, "Lulu, speak to me, baby, speak to me." But Lulu didn't speak. They took her to the old-timey doctor's office, then they took her to the old-timey hospital, and she just kind of laid there, saying nothing, doing nothing. And Mama, she sat in the rocking chair. "Oh, I hope my baby's going to be okay. I want my baby to be okay. Lulu, speak to me." One day, Guess what? Doing. She opened up her eyes. Everybody say, yay! Yay! Mama was ecstatic. She called everybody on the whole floor of the hospital. It was a little hospital. And they came running in, but they didn't get there in time because Lulu had gotten up in her nightie, I will add, and she was dusting the furniture. Mama couldn't believe it. She almost fainted. Lulu didn't even know how to dust. Then she was sweeping and straightening, and everybody was just in shock. Lulu had never done stuff like that. Well, this continued. The doctor said she was just fine and she could go home, and she did. And Lulu continued to be the sweetest, nicest, most helpful, best house cleaner you ever would want to meet. In fact, you know what? She married a nice fella, and they had children, and they lived happily ever after. But nobody could explain what had happened to Lulu. I mean, what changed? But then one day, Mama knew. You know how mamas know? I'm a mama to kitty cats, and I know. And my mama knew. She had this look. You know the look I'm talking about? Of course, we teachers had it too. You know, the look. Well, Mama was looking at Lulu, and she saw it. There on her cheek was a red handprint. Real faint. You could barely see it. But Mama knew that great-great-great-great-grandma had come back and smacked the fire out of that girl. And that's the story of Lulu. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've been telling that, oh my gosh, have been in the Greensboro Historic Graveyard for 40-some years. We're not having it because of COVID, but you can see me on their website. Hold it. Where is it? Okay, I got to put my crown on. This is one of those shows, you know, where they change clothes and everything. Aren't you impressed? You didn't know you were going to get one of those kind, did you? Okay, I'm not really changing clothes. I'm changing headgear. As my friends will tell you, especially Nancy, I have a thing for my hair. So I have to have hats and barrettes, and this is my tiara for ghost stories. This is another story about a youngin', and it takes place down east where I grew up, down on the coast. Now, Wildest Mama was a conjure woman. Back in those days, that's what they called them. Somebody who could heal your sore arm, or take your headache away with a herb tea, or even maybe help you dream about who you were going to marry that night. She was very sweet and very popular. But one day she woke up and she said, Wiley, whatever you do, don't you go in the swamp today. Now, Wiley and his mama lived in a teeny little house, barely, a log cabin on the edge of the swamp down east. Those swamps can be deep and dark and scary, even in the daylight. Well, I tell you what, I was riding through, this is a true story, Green Swamp on the way to Oak Island. My car stopped working. You know, you see that in the movies where the car just quits. I was so scared. I just thought, sure, this is true, that the alligators and the snakes, everybody gonna come up on the road, because the water was right there. Luckily, I had AAA, and 5 hours later, they told me nothing was wrong with my car. But you know, I don't go that way anymore. I'm serious. I do not go through the Green Swamp, and neither should you. But Wiley and his mama kind of liked it there. Wiley knew all sorts of things, and he'd go wandering in the swamp, take a boat and pole his way through. He had 2 dogs. They went with him to protect him. But today, they'd gone off. And Wiley had to chase him. So he went into the swamp, forgetting what Mama said. He got deeper and deeper, for he realized that he was too deep. He called the dogs, woo, No answer. So he decided he'd turn and gone home and they'd follow him. But he was too late, because behind him he heard a branch go crack. And then he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Something walking in the quicksand. Come on, help me do that. I know you want to. Come on, just a little. Come on. Oh, that was good. Sorry, I get choked up. And he turned, because behind him there was standing a huge, tall monster with teeth covered with green moss, and he roared, "Rawr!" And it was the hairy man. It was the hairy man. Oh, while I was scared, his knees were knocking. He backs up and he falls over a log and he said, "I know he's going to eat me up." But the hairy man grinned. He had him a gunny sack. He said, "I need some company. I need a youngin like you to take home, play with me." Well, I did not want to go home and play with the hairy man. So he had to think of something quick. He's thinking and he's thinking and he's thinking. Remember I told you he was smart? Did I tell you he was smart? He's smart. He thought, "Oh, hairy man, I heard tell of you before, hairy man. I heard you can do magic tricks." Well, when the hairy man heard that, he was so excited. He was famous. They didn't have TV back then. He was famous. So he puffs up and I said, "Could you please just do one little magic trick for me?" The hairy man couldn't resist. He gets those lips ready, those big, ugly, furry lips, and he goes, "Did you hear anything? Did you hear anything, sir?"
No.
Of course not. It was a silent whistle. But those dogs way deep in the swamp, they heard it. And they came a-running. Come on, y'all can help me do this part too. And they were a-barking and a-barking, and they came tail that hairy man just turned, and he went running and splashing through the swamp. He trips over a log and goes kerplunk right in the quicksand. Everybody say, "Yay!" Come on, everybody. Yay! Oh, while I had to sit down, he was so relieved. And he ran all the way home, him and his dogs. Boogity, 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 boogity. Everybody say, "Boogity, boogity, 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 boogity." He gets home, and there's Mama. Uh-oh. She had that, remember we talked about it, that look. She was not happy. She said, "Wally, I told you not to go in the swamp." Wally said, "Mama, I didn't go in the swamp. I just said to go find my dog." He said, "I'm sorry, but don't you worry. I saw that hairy man and I took care of him, Mom. Pow! I made him follow the quicksand and he is gone." She gave him the look. She said, "Wally, that hairy man is not gone. We got to get ready, honey. You go get some firewood and build me a big fire in our little fireplace." He did. Then she says, "Wally, go out to the piggy pen and get the baby piggy." "What?" said Wally. He loved to play with the piggy. Mama never, ever let him pick up the piggy. So he goes out and the piggy's going, he's a-talking to him, bringing him on in. And Mama says, "Put him in your bed." His bed? He'd been wanting to sleep with Piggy forever, and Mama wouldn't let him even in the house. He was so happy. He put Piggy in the bed. He covers him up. He gets ready to get his jammies on. Mama says, "Stop. You got to go up to the loft. You got to hide by the fireplace." "I am not," said Wally. He says, "I am going to beat up that hairy man." "No," said Mama. "We're going to trick him. We're going to use our mind power." So Wally listened to Mama. He went up those rickety-rackety ladder stairs. He went up there and she went out on the front porch in her rocking chair. She had a little lemonade or maybe moonshine, I'm not sure what. And she just sat and sat, and the darkness fell over that swamp like a velvet blanket. She had almost given up when behind her she heard a branch go crack. And then she saw a sight she could not stand. Out of the muck and the gloom and the dirt, out jumped the hairy man! And he had those long teeth covered with green moss. And he says, I'm gonna eat you up. Well, his mom just sat rocking. She says, hi there, hairy man, how you doing? Ooh, that made him even madder. He said, you better be afraid of me. I'm gonna bring the lightning down and burn this house to the ground. She said, no, you're not. I got some sweet milk that'll put out that fire. Remember, I told you she was a conjure woman. Then he said he was going to bring the bugs and the locusts and all those things to eat her up and the house and wild. She said, no, you're not. I got wildwood honey. One by one, she took care of everything he could do to her. Finally, she says, hey, man, I tell you what, I will make a bargain with you. I tell you, if you go away and never come back, never bother anybody in these parts again, I will give you what you want. He could hardly believe it. He starts that grin, because you know what he wanted. He wanted Wiley, the youngin in the bed. So he couldn't believe his good luck, and finally says, okay. Now I must tell you, a promise is a promise, even for a hairy man. So he could believe his good fortune. He took that big old hairy paw and he reaches into the house. He's feeling around. He didn't feel Wiley anywhere, and then he came to the bed. He felt a lump. He knew it was that youngin. He scooped up the blankies and everything else, brought it on out so he could see on the front porch, and off jumped the little piglet. The hairy man was so mad he was stomping up and down. He said, what are you trying to pick? You told me your son Wiley was in there. She said, now wait a minute. You said you wanted the youngin. Well, the youngin was the young pig in the bed. The hairy man had to stop and think for about 2 minutes. He could not think of an answer because he agreed. He wanted the youngin in the bed, and it was a young piglet. So the hairy man stomped off into the swamp, taking his empty gunny sack with him, never to be seen or heard from again. But just in case, people always go around that part of the swamp and that edge. And so should you, and I am too, because you don't want to be on that road too close to the swamp, because out of the darkness might jump the hairy man, and he still wants company like you. And that's the story of the hairy man. It's a North Carolina story that's been passed down, and it, I don't know how, but finally made it into my third book, because it was from the coast, right? The third book also has stories. Well, where is that? I keep rooting around in these bags. Has stories my daddy told me, all of us. He would tell stories in front of the fire on Topsail Island, and one of our favorites was Blackbeard. If you want to see it again, I'm on YouTube. Just Google up Cynthia Brown or Cynthia Moore Brown. You can see me telling it at a festival, and it's true. Yes, that's why everybody likes it. Blackbeard the pirate really lived hundreds of years ago. He was one of the fierce, ferocious ones, but he was also very smart, very good looking, and charming. He had a whole fleet of ships that he captured. His flagship was the Queen Anne's Revenge. And this was his favorite place, was to go to my island, Topsail Island. Of course, back then there was nothing on it, not even cows. That's where he would go. Back behind the island, they'd anchor down, keel haul the Queen Anne's Revenge, lower the sails, and they'd have a young cabin boy up on top in the crow's nest just watching, making sure nobody was sneaking up on him. And then, every now and then, he'd spot one of those rich ships, merchant ships, cargo ships, bringing things up and down the North Carolina coast. That's when they go, shh. They pull up the anchor and they go silently out the inland and the inlet right there at Topsail Island. You could still stand on that end of the island and look and almost picture a pirate ship. He'd go sneaking out in the barely light, and there that poor ship would be. And pow! Out of the darkness, pow! He'd be firing off his cannons. They say he had 40 cannons on that little ship, and those poor merchants did no thing to do against it. They'd get right on next to him, heave to! That's what pirates say. And they'd be grappling at that ship and swarming aboard. They'd be kissing all the girls, stealing all the jewels, stealing all the jewels, and having a pirate time. That night, they'd probably set it adrift, or he'd steal the ship and set the people adrift. That night, they'd have a big pirate party, kind of like we're having, only better. They'd have all kinds of fun and singing and dancing and eating and drinking, and you know how pirates were. Well, okay, maybe you didn't, but they had a good time. Then it was time to divide the treasure. There'd be, I gotta stand up for this, make sure you get this straight. There'd be one for you and two for me. One for you and two for me. I mean, Blackbeard was the captain, right? But then that night, after all of them were laying fast asleep, Blackbeard would take a chest full, lower it into one of the longboats, and then row ashore to Topsail Island, or Ocracoke, or one of the Outer Banks, but mainly Topsail. He'd dig a hole up above the high water mark, dig it deep, and lower that chest right down in there. And that gold is still there. No one has found it. Oh, some scientific scuba divers went down and dove on the Queen Anne's Revenge, because it really did go aground right there. Hurricane Fran uncovered it. They brought up cannons, dinner plates, a bell, but no gold. So where is the gold? Is it true, did Blackbeard dig one big hole on Topsail Island and throw it all in and call it the gold hole? Because there have been treasure hunters looking for that, but nobody's found it. I myself have looked since I was a child. I would go with my brother Mackie and make him dig. And we looked and looked and looked. We never did find it. But Daddy always told this at the inn, around the blazing campfire on the shore right there at Topsail Island on the beach. He'd say, don't stay after dark, for they say that the spirit of Blackbeard guards the treasure. I never saw him, but you can imagine as dusk falls and the sea oats are blowing, you have that feeling that suddenly you're not alone. And you know it could be. But that shadow, that one way over there, is Blackbeard. And he's looking for some company like you. Yo-ho, up she rises, yo-ho, up she rises, yo-ho, up she rises, early in the morning. Come on, everybody, help me with this part. What shall we do with the wayward sailor? What shall we do with the wayward sailor? What shall we do with the wayward sailor, early in the morning? Thank you, and that's a true story for you from Topsail Island. Thank you. And like I said, you can see that on YouTube. Also, the last one I'm going to tell. And the last one I'm going to tell is in both books because it's my favorite. Fred was brilliant computer genius, mathematician, physicist, and was not the likely person that I would marry because we were so totally opposite. But he brought a lot of good things out in me, and I taught him to love stories, and he kind of started believing. He began going with me whenever I performed all over the state. Like I said, Mama would go, and he would travel with her and me. He became my, and I'm really missing him, he became my roadie. He'd get the microphone set up. He would have helped Mary and told her what kind of chair to get. And he told his own funny stories. They were mainly about me and things like a chipmunk, and I don't know. I don't want to repeat those stories, but he really loved the storytelling. This was his favorite story. In fact, it's probably the most one that I get requested the most. The Discovery Channel, I know, you're not going to believe this, I didn't either. We had to clean up the living room. It took 3 weeks. The Discovery Channel wanted to come and film me and some other experts about this story. And they did. And you can see it. They're repeating it all the time. Do I get residuals? No. Did I get anything? No. But my living room got cleaned. And it was fun. And the name of the series is Monsters and Mysteries. Well, this is one of the mysteries. Before I start this story, does anybody have any questions or anything they want to share with the lovely audience? I wish we had about 3 hours because you guys are awesome. You're joining in, and give yourselves a big clap, everybody. Bigger, 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 yeah. Good, good, good. So did anybody have any questions or anything they want to tell us? Anybody have a quick ghost story they're going to share with their friends later? Okay, how about a story? Remember, Mary, you make sure they tell stories, okay? No? No questions. Well, pretend I'm one of those famous people that, that you come to hear at those concert thingies, and you get to ask questions. You don't have any questions? Some that the children like is, where do you get your stories? They want to know that. And I'll say, well, I collect them. And I look at places for strange happenings and feelings. And I'm not a witch, but I have special feelings powers. Does that make sense? In other words, I just get feelings in certain places where you wouldn't think you would feel anything. Or I get cold. If I was in Poplar Grove, one of my stories, we went on the tour and I walked through one of the rooms and I could feel this chill. So I know you all probably have some insights like that too. And certain stories appeal to me, you can tell. I like stories that are funny and as well as telling you history and stuff. One little boy wanted to know, how much do you get paid if you're a storyteller? I said, well, I think I should be paid about, 10 million like LeBron James, but unfortunately storytellers don't get paid very much at all. But I do it because I love it, and of course I did it at the library and as a school teacher, and for the love of the stories. In the pines where the sun never shines, and the cold and the chilly wind blows. True love, won't you fly to me? Tell me, where did you sleep last night? The road from Greensboro to Jamestown and High Point, back in those days, was so bumpy and rocky and awful. Why, they said you had to change your tire sometimes going from one place to the other because it'd wear out the tire. Well, Fred's Aunt Janie used to do a lot of dating at the speakeasies, and they'd have to change a tire. She put it in her diary 2 times. So it was a rugged road. He was driving his old car real slow because by now the storm had come up. His windshield wipers were going back and forth, but they weren't going fast enough. He slowed down as he came to Jamestown. The big old railroad bridge was always scared him. It was on that curve. And that's when he saw her, standing there beside the side of the road in the curve was someone. He slowed down and he could see that it was a lady. And she had something long and white blowing in the wind. He pulled over. Back in those days, it was safe to help folks on the highway and pick up hitchhikers. And he pulled over to help her. He'd been taught right by his mama and grandmamas. He got out of the car and walked over, and as he got closer to her, he could see that, yes, it was a young lady. She was so beautiful. She had long, beautiful hair, and yet it was covered with sticks and leaves and dirt. Her dress was beautiful, a party dress, but it was torn and tattered and windblown, and again, sticks and dirt. I stopped to see if I could help you. He looked into her eyes. She was so beautiful, but those eyes were as cold as ice. She didn't say anything. He stammered on and said, well, how about, I have my car. You can get in my car and I'll safely take you wherever you're going. It's a terrible night. She didn't say a word. But then she kind of glided towards the car. So he scrambled over and tried to open the front door, but she wasn't at that door. She went to the back door, the rear door. He opened it up. When she passed him, it was so cold. He was shivering. She was so cold. He got in and he said, here, put this over you. It's my grandma's quilt. She has me bring it with me. You never can tell. He covered her up with it. And then he nervously got around to the other side and got in the car. She was so quiet, it was scary. He's just babbling on, and he went on through the bridge. He's on the other side, and he said, where are you going? Where can I take you? She still didn't say anything, but then he noticed she was pointing one long, white, skeleton-type hand. He looked ahead, and yeah, there was a light on the hill. Oh, okay, I can take you there. And he turned right into the driveway, but it wasn't really a driveway. There were sticks and logs and rocks. So he had to stop the car, and he said, I'll walk you the rest of the way. I've got a lantern. So he got out of the car and got his lantern and was coming around the car to let her out. And he opened the car door and, ah! He screamed and almost fell back because the car was empty. There was nothing in the back seat. No one. Just a little hazy icy cloud. He whirled around and he said, "Hello, hello." He was worried because it was such a dark night. Wait a minute, I'll help you." He went scrambling through the woods and then took up to the path. He still couldn't see her. Going up that driveway, falling and going over logs, and finally he got up there to the house. It was just a simple house with a front porch, and the light was on. He knocked on the door. No one came. So he knocked again, and the door opened just a little bit. And there was a small little lady, very elderly, with tears in her eyes. She said, "Hello, I know why you've come." He said, "Well, ma'am, I picked up somebody down on the curb. I don't know if it was your daughter or who, but I just want to make sure she got here okay." She started crying even more. She said, "Oh, my dear, it's happening again. Every year on this night, someone tries to bring my poor daughter Lydia home. You see, she died in a terrible wreck with her boyfriend and 2 friends down there on the curve. She never will ever get to come home." He couldn't believe it. He said, "No, she was in my back seat. I know. I talked to her." And he's thinking and he's looking around, and then he sees a picture. He said, "Wait a minute, that's it, that's her. Isn't she pretty?" The woman just cried silent tears again. She said, "That's her. That's my Lydia." Well, he argued again and again with her. He just couldn't understand it. He had seen her. So she finally said, "Okay, I'll take you out to the burying ground." Now, back in those days, you know that they had family burying grounds or plots right near the farmhouse, and everybody would be buried there or at church. So she walked the path with him in the dark. He was holding a lantern. And when they got there, he could hardly believe his eyes. It was a white, beautiful stone with the name Lydia. Lydia. He couldn't believe it. He started crying too, and he was helping her back and turning to go and leaning on her, just shaking his head, just what had happened. And then he turned for one last look. One last look at Lydia's grave. And there, laying over her tombstone, was his grandmother's quilt. In the pines, where the sun never shines, and the cold and the chilly wind blows. If you should be driving along that way, I know I have gone on purpose on a rainy night. I still have never seen Lydia, but that's not to say she's not there. One of my storytelling shows in Jamestown, a lady came up and said her husband had picked her up in 1973, but he would never talk about it. And she refused to be interviewed or be on the Discovery Channel show, so I don't know. My friend Michael Renegar, rest in peace, an author, and I did research and found that there were several young ladies that age that died on that curve, and one of them was with her husband and 2 friends, and they it really sounded like that she could be Lydia. Her name was Annie Lydia Jones, I think. So who knows? the story could be true, but even if it's not. In the pines where the sun never shines. Thank you so much for joining us and for having me. You have just made my heart feel so good to be with friends and telling stories. And Mary, thank you so much. And especially, I'm so glad to see Nancy. Nancy and I went traveling a lot as art teachers with our friends.